Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Film and Family, a podcast for filmmakers and professionals in the film and entertainment industries who want to experience deep joy and satisfaction in their film careers and personal lives.
Let's jump right in.
Awesome. All right, so today is an episode on risk. What is risk? We want to talk a little bit about a few questions surrounding this topic and just open it up with that. So first, what is risk? Is risk good or bad? Is it possible to avoid risk?
Well, let's take them one at a time.
Yeah, but I just want you to kind of open up and let's just think about those for a minute. What do you think? Do you think risk is good or bad? Is it possible to avoid risk in general? These are things that I think I grew up with lots and lots of thoughts about. Our parents, we all grew up with parents with different, not just tolerances.
Levels of tolerance.
Yeah, not just tolerances for risk, definitely that, but like just beliefs about it. Beliefs about risk, approaches to the taking risks, especially surrounding money was a big one, but also other things. And, so yeah, let's talk about it. So what is risk, Anna?
I mean, I think it's just a mental construct. Like, it's not a fact, even though we try to make it factual and we try to find evidence to support our beliefs. But really, we're just looking at the future, which is always uncertain. And we're trying to measure how uncertain it is or isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think the risk can be measured to a degree. I think it can be quantified to a degree, although there is always a sort of, depending on what it is, there's always going to be a certain degree of uncertainty.
I mean, I think that's what the
because anything's possible.
Discipline is. It's like risk. We're trying to measure. And
somehow quantify what that is. And so for me, it's like, yeah, it's a mental perception or conception, but it's also a measurement of what's the maximum loss potential versus the maximum gain potential. And, how big of a gap is that? So maybe if it was something that like I could bet $10 on it and lose a maximum of 10, but if I win something, I could win a maximum of 100. I'd say that's a relatively small risk, but it's, seems like, like, I mean, if you're literally just betting on something random, what's the likelihood that you're going to win that 100? So you're measuring likelihood of winning as well as the maximum reward versus the maximum loss. And so is risk good or bad?
What do you think?
I think I grew up believing that risk in general was bad. You wanted to avoid it. I think I thought like, certainty. I want to do things that are tested and proven and true. And there's an element of that I think it's constructive, that we should be looking for good theory, principles that you can live your life on and that are just always true. I think that can be really helpful, but is risk actually inherently bad?
Well, and I think I had a very different upbringing and perception of risk, and that's something interesting about our relationship dynamic. And one reason we like to start the episode by saying, let's jump right in, is because that's kind of how we've started to live our life. It's
kind of how we lived our whole life from day one of married life.
Yeah. And I think that's how I've always kind of lived my life. Like, I really like change. I like trying new things. And so I'm always like, let's do this. Let's try it. Let's just find out.
And I do like the long game a little more sometimes. I'm like, all right, like, are we going to be friends? We're going to be friends forever. And like, that's like a personality thing for me, is like when I'm making new friends, I usually like, I'm trying to like gauge the potential. It's like almost like a courtship. I'm like, okay, so are we going to be like best pals? You're going to come over all the time. We're going to work. We're going to collaborate. We're going to do everything together. And like, it's kind of an interesting thing that Anna's pointed out in me, that I'm always like, it's really frustrating to me to have like these one-offs, like I'll hire you to do this job and then like hire you again in 2 years or whatever. And I don't know. And it's kind of like boring for me to do.
Well, but you've always been a little more hesitant. But once we jump into whatever we jump into, our roles kind of reverse. I feel like I'm the one who starts to be like, maybe this wasn't a good idea. I'm a little scared. Maybe we should get out. And you're like, hey, this isn't so bad. Like, let's stay with this.
Like our marriage. I was like, this is great. And you were like, I don't know about this. This was a bad idea.
Don't put words in my mouth. I never said that.
But yeah, but you know, just to defend the blanket statement that has been laid upon me, I do think that I often like to jump into things as well. And that's actually, I think, something that we had in common that people were kind of shocked by when we got married. We'd just be like, well, yeah, well, let's just like throw all the money we have, which wasn't a lot, into this thing we were moving toward, or let's just quit our day jobs and let's just quit our day jobs and start doing this other thing full time, like on our own, freelance.
Let's just have babies while we're still in school and see what happens.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't know if that was a good idea.
We were advised against that a lot, but we were just...
All interested parties advised us against that.
Well, and again, that's where you don't know the how. And we talked about this last episode, was if you have a strong why, you can go through any how. And I think if you really like your reason for doing what you're doing, you don't have to have a how yet. You can just do it and you figure out the how as you go. And for some people, that feels really scary and really risky.
Yeah. So I think bottom line is risk good or bad? I think it depends. And I think it's something you can decide.
Yeah.
On a case-by-case basis, is this a good risk or a bad risk? Or is this a risk I'm willing to take or unwilling to take? And why? Ask yourself, why? Why or why not? Why do I want to make this risk, take this risk, and why not? Something I've come to realize is that it's hard to exercise faith in anything without there being an element of risk, because you're choosing to believe something you can't see, and there's a potential you could be wrong. That's why it's faith, because, you know, you could be wrong. It could all end up being, you know, for nothing. But you give it a shot. You believe in it for a while and you see if it works and if it serves you. And when you believe in it, it helps to kind of materialize and make it true and make it a reality in your life.
Yeah.
So, you can think of that on a spiritual level, but also just on a practical level. So, is it possible to avoid risk? What do you think?
Well, not if you want to progress in life.
But is it possible?
I mean, kind of. I think we can avoid failure by not trying, but basically that's failing in advance, right? So maybe not.
Yeah. Part of me kind of thinks it's not possible to avoid risk. Like everything you're doing is like you're risking on something because you believe something.
Well, there's always uncertainty. Like,
yeah,
we never know. We make our plans. We like to daily plan and we lay out our plan for the day and we think we can control our day and we know what's going to happen, but we don't know what's going to happen.
Sometimes that blows up.
None of us saw coronavirus coming.
Well,
we never know exactly what's going to happen.
And that's something I think about, like self-employment versus traditional employment, is that banks will leverage that on a risk level, whether they'll give you money for a house and things like that, right? If you're self-employed, you have a lot less chance of getting a loan from a bank, especially a conservative bank like the one we bank with, which shall remain nameless. But but that's just a thought, because we've seen people with quote unquote steady day jobs. You can lose your job. You have one client that's hired you for ever. That's what we all think when we get a job. Oh, this is a job that's going to last forever. And there's really no security there. You can believe that there's security there. And it's the same with self-employment. You're living sort of contract to contract or job to job or whatever. Even what most people consider like the best situation, where you have passive income, it can disappear. You could have passive income coming from properties that just get wiped out by a hurricane. I've heard it happen. Happens to people all the time. Your net worth is soaring, and then all of a sudden a hurricane wipes out all your properties, your investment properties, and what was like this setup for life, foolproof retirement plan, gone, you know? So risk isn't really avoidable in my opinion. And I don't really believe that there's certain things that are quote unquote more secure, especially things that are sort of mortal.
Well, and I think if we can accept that risk is a part of life, that uncertainty is a part of life, then we can kind of release ourselves from a job we're incapable of doing, which is controlling everything that happens. And when we're trying to control everything that happens, that can create a lot of anxiety. And
frustration, because there's inevitable failure there. Because you can't control everything that happens. You cannot control all of your circumstances. So what would you consider a risk worth taking?
Yeah, I think risks, just to start, that are not worth taking for me are just my highest priorities. So I actually know what my priorities are in order. It's something Kent and I've both intentionally listed out. My relationship with God, my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my kids. Those are my top 3. And even with myself, those are not things I risk because they just matter too much to me.
Yeah.
But there's other things that I'm fine with risking. Money, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's take risks. And like you said, we can't really avoid risk. There's still risk in relationships and in everything that we do. But I'm definitely not playing with it as much. I'm not trying to toe the line or see how far I can get. I just am trying to protect what matters most to me. But then there's other things that I just don't think matter as much. And so I'm like, let's just play with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have an infinite number of spouses to risk with. Some people go through them pretty quick. But I do have an infinite number of dollars. I mean, I don't currently.
Where are they?
but they exist in the world, and I can get them and lose them. And there's potential consequences to that. And I'm willing to risk that to a degree at times and seasons. You know, I'm not saying that every risk I've ever taken in terms of money was a good idea or that they've all paid out. But it's something I have decided for my own sake to not be too scared of and to be willing to take those risks. Because, frankly, I think some of the most successful money people that I've observed, and this is not a professional financial recommendation or advisement, nor is this program qualified to give any such advice. But, you know, I just think that people who are really successful with money aren't afraid of risking it for something.
High risk is high return.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, in some situations that you can gauge that to be so. So, yeah, it's really interesting. So it's something I think I want to invite the audience to ask. What are some risks you feel are worth taking? What are some risks you feel are not worth taking? And why do you feel that way about those risks?
It's good to know what that is for you. Yeah. Set your own boundaries.
Well, and ask yourself, do you want to keep those boundaries? Do you want to keep those beliefs and thoughts and just analyze it and say, okay, do I want to shift my beliefs about risk? Do I want to adjust it? What kind of beliefs do you want to have, even if you don't have them yet?
Oh, what's that quote about the comfort zone? Like,
no greatness was ever achieved outside of your comfort zone.
No.
Something like that?
Inside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, inside your comfort zone. I botched it. Yeah, that was on my junior high math class wall or something. It was one of those, courage and then a picture and a quote. You know, the posters I'm talking about.
Good one, though. It's a good one.
I like it, yeah.
Do they still have those in schools? They should.
Yeah.
I remember some, too. Some
of them were a little platitudinal. Is that a word? What are some common risks that filmmakers typically have to take or do take on a regular basis? I mean, I have a list here, but off the top of our heads.
Putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. I think that's a risk worth taking sometimes.
Yeah, professionally and artistically, because you're knocking doors, you're auditioning, or you're pitching ideas, or you're, trying to network with people and meet new people. So yeah, you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and just anytime you put something personal that you've made out there, you're going to get people who like it and people who don't like it. And you have to be willing to do that if you want to.
Well, what's the most you could lose? The most you could lose is that someone hates you. They hate your work. They hate you as a person. They just despise you and they feel angry about it, which is all up to them, right? But I mean, let's say you did that. Let's say you were going to pitch to 100 people and all 100 of them just hated your idea. They think you're an unattractive, horrible human being. I mean, I'm trying to think of well, is that really did you lose anything?
No.
100 people totally decided to despise you and everything about you and all your artistic endeavors.
What people think doesn't tell you anything about you or your idea. But it only tells us something about them.
But have you actually lost anything at that point?
No, you just have learned something about them.
Yeah, you've learned something about 100 people who are apparently very grumpy because I don't hate you. We love you.
Yes, we do.
And we want to help you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Yes.
And joining us in our conversations.
So yeah, that's interesting. I think some filmmakers self-fund projects. I've heard, the very common tale of pushing and pushing and pushing a feature film, and then what happens? They run out of money and it's an indie film, and they load up credit cards. It's an interesting one.
We've definitely put a lot of money into projects before.
Yeah. Luckily, so far it's just been cash. I don't know if we've loaded up a credit card to finish a movie.
We have for other things. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, getting personal. This is a practice that I've seen, and I've seen most filmmakers recommend against it who have been through that road. So it's interesting. Is that worth it or not? I mean, it's a risk. It depends on how successful you think the movie's going to be. If the thing's a smash, maybe it was worth it to leverage some debt to get the thing done. Certainly better than not finishing it, or finishing it and shelving it because it stinks, or it's just not even close to what you were hoping it would be. But you're going to have to measure that. I'm obviously not going to tell someone to throw money onto a credit card or not do that. There might be more responsible ways to leverage debt than a credit card, but I mean, that's interesting.
Well,
Self-funding a project can be very risky.
When we're pitching to investors, we are not usually asking them to take risks. That they, we try to make sure they know this is money you have to be okay losing if you need to.
Money you're okay risking.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are asking them to take a risk, but we are saying this has to be a risk you're willing to bottom out on, lose everything, be totally upside down on. Is it a project you care about enough that you'll be happy either way? You're happy you helped it get made.
To do that and not be financially ruined.
Don't ask people to invest money in your movie if you think that that's going to financially ruin them. That's just personal, opinionated advice that I've taken to heart. You can go into debt for a business, a project, education, whether it's film school or there's a lot of online education now. That's all risk. Even if you pay cash for it, it's still a risk. There's a risk that the education isn't that good of quality, or that the project doesn't pay out. So yeah. Rejection is a constant risk. We've kind of touched on that. There's also risks associated with family life. We talked about that. We decided to risk by having kids while we were still in college. And I remember my dad saying, don't drop out. I don't care what you get your degree in, but you got to get a degree. His personal belief and opinion. In the end, I'm glad I took that advice. I actually learned invaluable things in film school, and most of it was in the last year and a half. But a lot of it was on the front end, but I was close to dropping out at one point. It's a common tale for film school students, but but that baby was a risk that we maybe were going to fail at balancing all of those priorities and financial strains and obligations while we were still going to school. In the end, I'm really glad we took that risk. I don't actually have any regrets. I don't feel like we should have waited. That was a personal choice. It's going to be a personal choice for you and your personal life, but having children is a risk.
Yeah, I was really proud, though. I was really proud to walk across the stage at graduation with a big pregnant belly and a baby in one arm and grab my degree with the other.
And if you choose not to take that risk, that's a personal choice, and it's not a big deal. It's not like that makes you a better person or a worse person. It's just what your priorities are and what you're willing to risk to get those things. And so, yeah, I personally feel like if someone were to ask me, do they think that risk is worth it? I'd say it was to us.
Sometimes there's a risk in not doing things.
Yeah, choosing to forego something is a risk. We've experienced that. We chose not to enter a competition to win a red.
Oh gosh, this is such a story.
And it was Christmas Eve. We were going to have to submit it by midnight. We said, what are we going to do? We tried to get some costumes. We had to shoot this shot-for-shot remake of a weird German music video.
We watched other people who'd already submitted, and they did a good job.
They did a good job, and we said, can we really beat those guys? And we found out about the competition late in the game, so we only had like 48 hours. We couldn't get the costumes in time, even if we did express shipping on Amazon. And were we going to really burn up our whole Christmas Eve that we could be spending with each other and family. And this was recently married. What are we going to do? We're going to do this thing. I mean, someone else is probably going to win it. They've already had good submissions with matching costumes to the original music video. So we called it quits. And we said, we're not going to risk ruining our entire Christmas Eve for this thing that might not really pan out. And this was something Jared Land posted on Instagram and said, everyone submit this thing in 4K or higher resolution and you'll win the latest Red camera at the time. Or I think it was actually when they were about to phase out of. But regardless, it was worth tens of thousands of dollars. And who won the competition in the end, Anna?
Every single person who applied.
All 60 people.
Which they did not announce.
Yeah, no one knew that he was going to do that. It was like a Christmas miracle. And all 60 people who submitted got that camera. What a story.
$50,000 camera.
Yeah, it was like a $50,000 or $60,000 brain at the time. It's not worth that much now because cameras depreciate rapidly. But yeah, man, we risked by not doing it, huh?
Yeah, we were kind of afraid to spend some money to put some things together.
Yeah, a few bucks and waste our Christmas Eve and whatever. And boy, did we learn a lesson after that.
Yeah, we really regretted not doing that.
We don't decide we're going to fail before we try something.
Well,
that's not the reason we decide not to do something.
We just decided, what's that quote? It's a really cheesy one, but don't let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. Or
you miss 100% of the baskets, or 100% of the
shots you never take.
Yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Another one of those posters on my math class wall.
Well, and we learned because then another competition came and we were prepared for it. We said, this is something that could be really a big deal for us.
We think we can compete and we're going to do it. And we're going to see this through to the end. And we did. We worked hard on that. And we won the audience choice on that. And it funded, that prize money funded our move to Georgia, yeah. Which was actually a really good move for our family and for our careers. So, yeah.
Really glad we didn't, that we did take that risk.
Yeah, that we did take that risk.
Not do it.
Yeah, there are risks in life. Think about that. Think about to yourself, are there risks that you haven't taken that you wish you would have? And when you're thinking about considering a risk in your life, whether it's money or whatever, say, is there a chance that I'll regret this if I don't risk it? Is there a chance that I will regret it if I do risk it? Because if I risk something that's going to compromise my marriage, is it worth this risk? You know, like, is there a chance I'm going to look back on this and regret it? Yeah, probably. But if I risk something that's, you know, I'm going to feel proud of, whether it works out or it doesn't. But if I choose not to do it, am I going to look back and say, man, I really wish I would have done that? Boy, do I wish I'd submitted to that Red competition. Whether you're a Red fan or not, man, a free one is always welcome, you know?
Yeah, and I think what this comes down to, as sort of to wrap it up, is how do I make this decision of when to risk and when not to risk and how much risk?
A mortgage is a risk. Sorry,
I think it's easy. It's easy to focus on what we have to lose and maybe forget about what we have to gain and what we have to lose by not doing it.
Yeah, we fear risk because we fear failure.
I think it's important to focus on the reasons you do want to do it. Focus on the reasons you would want to do whatever the thing is, and then look at the reasons you would choose not to do it, and pick the reasons you like the most that are not motivated by fear, because we don't make very good decisions when we're afraid. And so if we're deciding not to do something because we're afraid, probably not going to lead to the results that we want.
Yeah. So I actually think if we're afraid of failing, I think that's, like you're saying, we don't make very good decisions when we're feeling afraid. And I think we need to learn to overcome that fear of failure. And I think that'll help us become more comfortable with risk. And the reason I think we need to get over a fear of failure is not because it's bad to fail, but because it's good to fail. I think that more big failure especially in filmmaking, in art, and in money and those sorts of things are good. Risk big, fail big, and keep moving forward. I think that's really good. I think big failure in our personal lives and our integrity and things like that, I don't think that's worth taking, frankly. And I don't think it's worth failing big, and it's not worth risking big in those cases. But yeah, I think in that way, I think that this episode for me is just a case for filmmakers and artists to take more risk and to fail more in life. Not in life, but in their art and in film and in business and in their careers. And we have to be willing to risk, and we have to be willing to fail a lot. And I really hope that I can, go forward from here and keep saying, what's a big thing that I'm scared to do that I'll never regret. And when you find those things and you go after them, even if you fail, man, I'm learning more and more that each failure feels good for me. We've been failing a lot lately, I feel like, and there's a lot of little things that we've been doing where I'm like, yeah, I learned a ton from that, and it's okay because I failed on a pitch, or I failed on a draft of something, or I put something together that I wasn't particularly proud of, but I worked hard, I did my best, I risked some, and every time I learned a ton, and often those failures lead to better and new opportunities that wouldn't have come if I wouldn't have gone through that failure.
You learn way more from failure than you do from things just working out.
And that learning is worth more than money, and it's worth more than success often.
And all success is built on a mountain of failures.
Yeah.
We don't always see it, but
so,
it's there.
Hope that doesn't sound too cliche. It's just a real thing, and it's a thing that I've found has served me. That belief has served me, whether you believe it or not. But if you do believe it, it'll serve you too. So risk more. Ask yourself, what can you risk? And ask yourself, what shouldn't you risk? And what do you not feel willing to risk? And then protect that stuff you're not willing to risk, and get bold with the stuff you are willing to risk.
Yeah. And just as a final note, to help you get over the fear of failure that we all experience to some degree, is that the worst case scenario is always just a negative emotion.
Yeah. Yep.
Really, that's always what we're afraid of. What it comes down to is some kind of negative emotion, and you can handle any emotion.
Yep. The numbers on your bank account are neutral. The situation you're in is neutral. The words people say to you are neutral. But the feelings you feel are either negative or positive. And you can choose to believe what you want about the things people say or the situations you're in. So, yeah, get comfortable with failure, and it'll serve you.
Here's a quote from Spinoza in his Ethics. And it's in Latin, but the translation is, "Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as we form a clear and precise picture of it." Which I think...
Let me read that again.
We could talk about a little more on another episode, but if you realize that the worst case scenario is a negative emotion, and that emotion, when you get a clear, precise picture of it, which could just be describing it, is usually not that bad. It's like, I feel heavy in my chest, and my hands are shaking, or my face feels hot.
$112 in my bank account, and rent is due tomorrow. Does that make you feel... Is that what he's saying?
No.
Oh.
Like, I
emotion.
think he's talking about the emotion itself. What is the physical sensation of the emotion?
Oh. I was trying to be factual about the situation.
I think if you can describe...
Which is neutral.
...what it is, it's like, oh, really, that's it? Like, you're so afraid of that, of feeling hot in your face and heavy in your stomach and kind of sweaty. Like, I'm sure that's not comfortable, but is it really that bad?
Yeah.
Like, at least you're not being tortured and your arms are being ripped off. Like, that's something to be afraid of, but...
But, you can get over it. They're just arms.
Emotion is good. It's part of the human experience. We should embrace it. We should be willing to feel it all.
Yeah, that's interesting. And are you going to be a really good filmmaker if all you do is experience successes and positive emotions? You'll be like the worst filmmaker in the world. Sometimes I think I've watched films from people who might have never experienced failure or depression or struggle or loss. And boy, those are boring movies. But man, if you fail and fail and fail and fail, you're going to make some really good films.
Yeah, because your characters are going to really want something and have a hard time doing it and fail and fail and fail. And we love those stories.
Yeah, and because your character is going to become stronger, and you really can't make interesting characters and interesting stories unless you've been through interesting things and you've experienced loss and success and you've experienced strong emotions on both sides of the spectrum and you've sorted through the meaning of all those things. Those are filmmakers that we love experiencing the work of. So yeah, well, we will wrap up for today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the podcast, Film and Family. And we are really excited to continue providing episodes for you. Check out the podcast on anywhere where you get podcasts and subscribe, so you can stay up to date on all the new episodes. We're going to have hopefully some really great interview subjects coming up as well soon. Some people in the industry who have some great ideas on these topics that we're exploring. And we also want to make you aware of our website, invisiblemansion.com. And on that website, you can find information about our Film and Family program, which right now is accepting applications. And you can learn more about that on the website. And anyone who is the first 100 to apply gets a free $20 gift card to Amazon if you do a free consultation. And the free consultation is really just a learning experience. You can learn a lot from the free consultation, no obligation. You leave with a $20 gift card to Amazon and life-changing information about yourself.
I was going to say, the consultation's worth way more than the gift card.
Way more.
You're going to learn, well, a lot. Go visit our website. You can learn more about what you'll learn.
Check it out and see the life-changing experience that some of the past coaching clients have had. But we'll see you on the next episode. I keep saying that. I won't ever see you on any episode of this podcast, but you will hear our voices and we will feel you in spirit and be happy you're here.
All right.
And we'll share. See ya.
All right. Bye.
Bye.